Welcome to another episode of Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover. For this episode, we're going to be covering the NFC North as our State of the Division series continues. To help me out and talk through the NFC North, joined by my co-host Byron. Byron, welcome. And we've got a very special guest from the Detroit Lions who's going to give us some great insight. We've got Jeremy, who's just dropped off the stream as I was literally saying his name. So we've got Jeremy Ballaricon, who's going to talk through all things Lions. That's happened a couple of times in the last few minutes, him dropping out. But we'll welcome Jeremy, give him a chance to kind of shout out what he does and what he's all about when he rejoins us shortly. But yeah, I believe he works for the Motor City Tribune in Detroit. So great guest to have. And we'll have him when he comes back. He's currently on vacation somewhere. Spotty internet. He's dialing in, visiting a friend away at home. So we'll give him the opportunity to dial back in. We're covering the Lions last anyway, so he's got loads of time to drop in.
Cool.
But just to shout out, we're on the Let's Talk Sport YouTube channel, Let's Talk Sport Facebook page. We're live on Good Teams and Great Teams Cover Twitter account, and Jeremy is also streaming it to his YouTube account as well. So we are absolutely everywhere at the minute, and Jeremy's back. Good stuff. Time to try. We just covered a bit of ground while you were away there, Jeremy. Jeremy, thanks for joining us. I know you mentioned you're away on vacation at the minute, so we do appreciate you taking you some time out of your downtime to come and join us here. Before we get into looking at the NFC North, Jeremy, do you want to shout out where we can find you, where our viewers can find you if they're looking to follow you?
Oh, yes. You can find me on Let's Talk Sports with the Jeremy Ballrick Show that I do on Fridays and Sundays. You can also find me on the Kneecap Biting with the Detroit Lions here on my channel on YouTube. You can find me on Sideline Sports on occasional shows, and you can also find me on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. I pretty much do this 6 days a week.
Cool, good stuff. Well, we appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to the insight that you've got on not only the Detroit Lions, who clearly you are a big fan of, but also your division rivals as well, which is good. So let's get into it. Let's just jump straight in then. So we're going to start by having a look at the Minnesota Vikings first of all. So just a quick summary of kind of where the Minnesota Vikings are at. 2022, they finished 13-4. They won the NFC North title for the first time since 2017. In that run, they completed the largest comeback in NFL history, one that didn't make our draft, Byron, last week. Versus the Colts in Week 15. They trailed 33-0 before a 39-36 overtime win, which would have just been a hell of a lot more impressive if it was against anybody but Jeff Saturday's Indianapolis Colts. And Minnesota, incredibly, last year went 11-0 in one-score games during the regular season. Big off-season headlines for the Vikings. They released running back Dalvin Cook, traded Zadarius Smith to the Cleveland Browns. We've got you back, Jeremy. And they also hired Brian Flores as defensive coordinator. So, Jeremy, we'll just give you a second to get back up and running. Byron, kind of, what's your kind of view of the Vikings kind of heading into 2023?
I'm having such bad connection issues. I'm trying to get in there. I see from my channel, one of my subscribers said, "Keep it up, guys. Love you all. Thank you, Felicity."
Don't worry. We'll work through it, Jeremy. Don't worry.
And but yeah, Vikings. I think Vikings are building for 2024. Last year, I mean, they were 13-4 with a losing point differential. They were not a 13-4 team. I mean, it was fun to watch them, but they weren't a 13-4 team. I think it's kind of a clear the decks. You know, Adam Thielen went, Eric Kendricks has gone, Dalvin Tomlinson gone. A lot of big foundational pieces of the franchise really have kind of had a transition in the last year. Dalvin Cook obviously gone. I think it's really, I think it's a big year. Are they going to re-sign Kirk Cousins for 2024? Dubious, because they changed his contract, but they didn't extend his contract. Yeah, I think the Vikings, I don't think they're going to be in playoff contention this year. I think it's going to be like I say, clear the decks, take your cap hits this year, and see what 2024 brings. I think it's going to be a fresh start in 2024, and I don't think it's going to be a competitive year this year.
it seems odd that a 13-4 team from last year are making the moves that they're making, right? Because you'd think, 13-4 team, kind of the playoff, they just bumped from the playoffs instantly by the Giants, but some really big wins in there in terms of against some really, really good teams, and particularly some of the ones where you take the Buffalo one's a great example. The comeback in Buffalo on the road, where they
there we go. I'm going to try it without video. Maybe that.
No worries, we've got you back, Jeremy.
So
we were just in
the amount of lag on the stream.
In the process of talking about the Vikings, and the moves that they're making seem odd from a team that went 13-4 and won a division last season to sort of being a bit of a team that they don't seem to be looking to build on top of that.
Yeah,
which seems odd and very rare. Jeremy, what's kind of your take on the Vikings heading into 2023?
Give me just a second. I'm trying to get this to where it doesn't sound so garbly. I might even go outside. Maybe I'll get a better signal out there as long as it's not raining.
It's Jeremy in the jungle.
I don't know. Jeremy, where are you on vacation?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm going outside.
No worries. Well, while you're setting up, I'll carry on about the Vikings. So, it just seems odd that 13-4 team will be making such moves in terms of cutting a star running back, one of the best running backs in the NFL. So Darius Smith trading some, a presence on the defensive line like that. It just does seem really, really odd. The draft, I thought they, again, are the top of their draft, pretty solid, I thought. I love Jordan Addison as a wide receiver out of USC. Not UFC, that's a completely different sport. USC as well, and Mekhi Blackman as well on corner. That's definitely an area. So the secondary for Minnesota and defense as a whole, but secondary is really what let them down, I think, last year. So when you look at the 4 defeats that they had, they weren't close games. The 4 defeats they had in the regular season, they just got blown out. The Cowboys obviously battered them. The Packers hammered them. They took some really, really big beatings in Minnesota.
That's how it's so incredible to end, with 13 wins and a negative point differential. That does not happen.
Yeah.
It's
11 one-score games will do that to you, I guess. And I suppose is that the thinking then in Minnesota around, you're not going to win. You're not going to go 11-0 in one-score games again. It's just not going to happen, is it? No. The ball's bounced your way a few times in that, and a lot of it due to some great play as well. But ball's bounced your way a few times for that to happen.
I think it takes like real maturity and understanding where you are as a franchise to do that though, because how many teams and the NFC North is really winnable. Kind of a slight preview of the other 3 teams, I guess. But there isn't a Chiefs, there isn't a Bills, there isn't a Eagles, Cowboys, there isn't one of those in this division like that. And you'd be thinking, going end of last year, if you're a Vikings fan, we just won 13 games. Maybe we fluked some of them, maybe we were a little lucky, but division's there for the taking, and they kind of just went, well, that's not how we see it. We're going to build long term here, and I think that's to be commended, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. We'll see when you talk about it being a tight division. We'll see from a bookies perspective, this is the closest division in the NFL, and we'll see that from kind of the odds spread, which is interesting. Right, I don't think we're going to quite get Jeremy's take on the Vikings, but hopefully we'll be back when we move on to the Packers. Give us your floor and ceiling for the Minnesota Vikings, Byron, next year.
So again, my playoff prediction, I always do. I have them 4-13. I think the floor is probably the number 1 pick territory. That's probably a bit harsh, but I would have thought. But by the time you get towards the end of the season, 3-4 wins is going to be getting you closer to the number 1 pick. Truthfully, the offense is going to be really watchable. That's kind of the ceiling. I don't think there's a ceiling where they make the playoffs. Just that defense is so bad. I love Brian Flores as an addition. I think he's just a really disciplined coach. I think he's a good leader. I think he's one of them people who will inspire character. And those all sound a bit like cliched things, but I think it kind of tells how he was in Miami. You know, that team that he had in Miami was meant to be the tanking for tour, the worst team in football. And, you know, they were embarrassing the first 2 weeks that he was there. And then they were really competitive to end the season, which I think is difficult as a first-time head coach. And it's the kind of thing I think this defense is going to need, is a real leader and someone who's going to keep them together even if things aren't perfect. So, yeah, Justin Jefferson is probably my favorite receiver in football. I think he's probably the best wide receiver in football. Kirk Cousins played really well in Minnesota. I know primetime Kirk is not. It's a little bit laughable. He's very cheesy. He's probably not who I'd want as my quarterback. Jordan Addison, I think, is a great addition. TJ Hawkinson was great in Minnesota
last year.
Interesting what they do as a running back. Alexander Madison is kind of fine, but I don't think I wouldn't want him as my RB1, but he's kind of fine. If I was him,
a lot of talk on Madison from a fantasy perspective as well, which is interesting. Yeah,
I think he's just one of them guys though, because he's going to get volume. He has to be considered because he's going to get volume. And with the amount of money they've just saved on cutting Dalvin Cook, I mean, then maybe we'll add a Kareem Hunt or a Zeke or a Fournette. Maybe I would normally say or Dalvin Cook, but that seems unlikely because he wouldn't take a pay cut to stay there. So he's probably not going to take a pay cut to come back there. But I think the offense will be really watchable. But yeah, I don't think there's any way they get to 10 wins with just how poor that defense is going to be.
That's interesting. I'm a bit on the other side where I don't think they'll get 13, but I think they could be 10-7, and that might be enough to win that division. Right, we've got you back.
Yep, I'm going to turn up my camera real quick. I got outside. I could away from all the noises other than the wind.
No worries. So, we got, I always start saying there, I could see Minnesota sort of 10 games and that be enough to win the division. So I certainly would. I'm expecting to see Minnesota in the playoffs. I think there's the bit around the whole winning the one-score games isn't going to continue, but there's a bit of being able to win those games, and actually that might help you be on the right side of more of those than not. Yeah. That experience of winning those games. I like Kirk Cousins. It'd be great if Minnesota could play 17 1 p.m. games because they might go 17-0. But yeah, because this division's so wide open. A floor for me might be 7 wins maybe, because I do think they're a really good team. Division win, maybe 1 playoff win is possibly a ceiling for them. We'll try and get Jeremy back in just to hear his take on the Vikings. So we'll just get you back in, Jeremy.
All right. They have really reduced the amount of talent they have on their defense, and that's what worries me about those one-score games. It's not offensively, even though they lost Dalvin Cook. Alex Madison is a capable back. I like Dwayne McBride out of UAB. He's one of those ground and pound, take the ball on his back and get through the line. He'll be good in the goal line situations and also in 3rd and short. But my problem is Kirk Cousins is just a really good game manager quarterback. And now that they don't have Dalvin Cook, you won't see 8 men in the box as much. And you will see Justin Jefferson be able to be double teamed now.
So you the
loss of Dalvin Cook is going to be a lot bigger than a lot of people realize, because he's what forced them to put 8 men in the box and be in single coverage on all the wide receivers.
Cool. Jeremy, I'll get you back in. Give us your kind of. We always talk floor and ceiling with these teams. So what would you say is the Minnesota floor for 2023, and what would you say is their ceiling?
Their floor is 7 wins. Their ceiling is probably 10.
Pretty similar. Pretty similar thoughts to me there for sure. Cool. We'll move on from Minnesota then. We'll have a look at the Green Bay Packers. So just an overview of Green Bay. Green Bay finished 8-9 in 2022. They fell to 3-6 after losing 5 in a row, which was their longest losing streak since 2008. It was their first losing season and first time they missed the playoffs since 2018. But during the season, they became the winningest, I hate that phrase, but the winningest franchise in NFL history when they beat the Chicago Bears in Week 13, who they overtook. Off-season headlines, traded Aaron Rodgers to the New York Jets, of course. We talked about that on the state of the AFC East. And they kept to the habit of a lifetime with no splash free agent signings. Not really a lot happened. I maybe should have included Jordan Love's little slip-up last week. Did you see that? But I assume you saw that, Byron, yeah?
I felt a bit sorry for him, to be fair. I think he's not media savvy. And
Aaron Rodgers would have never done that.
No, Aaron Rodgers is media savvy in his own way, but it was painful.
Yeah.
And did you see his explanation?
Yeah, it was the context. Yeah.
Just don't do it. Yeah. Just say hey, have a good day to the person. Don't record anything for Bears fans. You're not, just say you're getting on with your day. You're not going to lose anything by losing Bears fans.
Yeah.
All you're going to do, man, they drafted a lot of players.
There's a lot on that draft.
I didn't realize it was quite so many. But yeah, the only thing you're going to do is make a fool of yourself. And if you tell Bears fans, hey, I'm not doing anything, you're only going to endear yourself to Packers fans. Who cares what Bears fans think of you? It's very naive.
Yeah. We'll throw this one over to Jeremy. Jeremy, we'll get you back in. Jeremy, give us your kind of view on kind of how the Packers are shaping up heading into 2023.
With losing Adrian Amos, they didn't do enough in the safety room, in my opinion, in this offseason. They should have went after the guy we got. They should have went after either CJ or picked a better safety in the draft because there was better ones on the board when they picked one. I just think, I think they're going to struggle a little bit because they're switching to another quarterback. They really didn't do anything to help shore up the wide receiver room because Green was expected to be a day 3 pick. To pick him in the second round like they did, that was a bit of a reach.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't know what to expect out of them because the biggest question mark is Jordan Love.
And just thinking about that, I mean, what are you expecting, Jeremy, to see out of Jordan Love in 2023?
I think they're going to get between 5 and 8 wins.
Interesting. Okay. Byron, let's throw it your way. Again, biggest question mark, Jordan Love. We've not seen a lot of him.
No.
What are you kind of expecting to see?
Well, I kind of found it interesting that he kind of bet against himself and the Packers kind of bet on, we don't know what you're going to be. And he was happy with that, because they didn't give him the 5th-year extension, 5th-year tag. They gave him extended his contract a year, but a reduced rate. And if he plays out both years, it'll work out fine for him. He'll make a little more money, but not more guaranteed money, which, I don't know, it kind of felt telling, I guess. I think it's a really weird position that they've put themselves in. They don't have a backup to him. It's kind of like we're in the Jordan Love ship this year, and we'll see what it is. He's not a little convincing in the small parts we've seen. Christian Watson had a fine rookie year, but it was very splash play. He wasn't like, a Justin Jefferson or, Jalen Waddle. He wasn't shining every week. He had some big moments, but overall wasn't spectacular. They've added plenty of rookie weapons, but I'm not sure how many of them are, like Jeremy mentioned, Jaden Reed there. I liked Jaden Reed in college, but yeah, I was really surprised to see him go at pick 50. I thought he'd be a round 3, round 4 kind of guy. Doesn't mean I'm right. Romeo Doubs had moments last year, but again, he didn't stand out. He was a late round pick. He done great for what he is. The tight end room is very young, very unproven. I mean, the best aspect is really the running backs. Aaron Jones is still, to me, one of the best running backs in the NFL, top 10. AJ Dillon's a grinder and a pounder, and Quadzilla is a big guy. But yeah, I don't have high hopes for Jordan Love. I'm really interested where they're going to be in a year from now, because I don't think they're going to be in a bad enough spot to be picking early, certainly. I don't think this is a Super Bowl winning team, though. The one thing they're going to get is a second first-round pick from New York, which could help them move up for a quarterback if Jordan Love isn't the man. And I don't think he's going to be. I think he's going to be, at best, I think he's going to be like a fine player, a Jimmy Garoppolo type. I don't think there's any chance that he's a top 10, top 12, builds everyone around him type quarterback. I don't think that's in his range of outcomes.
Yeah, I think he's going to have had a spectacular offseason for that to happen, and we haven't heard that that's the case so far. So yeah, interesting. I think maybe what we'll see is a bit changing. I think that Green Bay defense should, in theory, be getting better year on year. You know, they took the 2 Georgia players last year. They should, haven't had a year in the NFL. I really like the 2 tight ends to help Jordan Love in Musgrave and Kraft. I think they're going to be big helps. And Christian Watson needs to have definitely a big year if we're going to see any kind of major success from the Green Bay Packers. Jeremy, you kind of touched on it, but just jump back in for us. Give us your sort of floor and ceiling for the Green Bay Packers in 2023.
I have it at 5 to 8 wins because last year they were the 21st ranked defense overall in yardage, 27th in scoring, and they were one of the bottom 5 in running back against, and they really didn't do a lot to shore that up early in the draft. I really thought they'd do more on the whole defensive front to help shore up that running game against, and I didn't see it.
That's there's probably some more against the run that the Green Bay Packers need to do. I don't think Van Ness helps them with that, and later on the draft, I don't see they took Wooden out of Auburn, Brooks out of Bowling Green, but I don't know if that's going to be enough to kind of really help them. Byron, floor and ceiling then for the Packers in 2023?
I have them at 8 and 9, same as last year. But I think the floor is probably, like Jeremy says, probably 4-5 wins probably. Defense isn't spectacular. Offense isn't spectacular. Defense has got talent on paper. It just never seems to dominate. I think the ceiling, if Jordan Love does pop, or at least be better than I think he is, I mean, they can win the division. I think, like we were saying with Minnesota, it is a real tight division. They could maybe get to 11 wins, 10, 12 wins maybe. So I think a division win wouldn't be out of the question. And, a cold home game in Lambeau, maybe they're winning a playoff game. I have them at 8 and 9 and missing the playoffs, but I think the ceiling is probably 11, 12 wins.
Yeah, I think the Green Bay for me is probably the tightest one where I think maybe I don't think there'll be any worse than 7 wins. I'd find it a real struggle to think they'd win more than 10. Yeah. It very much just depends on Jordan Love, and we'll see. But yeah, it's an interesting one for the Green Bay Packers, and this could be if Jordan Love doesn't pan out, they could be in trouble for a while. They've not really had to go without kind of a franchise quarterback, have they, for so long? To go for all
3-5
Rodgers, yeah. So you've had kind of like 30 years of being, having a great, fantastic quarterback that you can rely on. So yeah, new territory for the Green Bay Packers. Let's move on.
Sorry. Even at 8 and 9, I only have them 1 game out of the playoffs. I think it is maybe 2 games out of the playoffs in the NFC because it's so top heavy. But even if you do get to 10 wins or 9 wins, you could still sneak into the playoffs this year. The NFC is very top heavy.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Wildcard, we're wildcard teams at 9 and 8 last year, didn't we? It wouldn't surprise me again in the NFC if that was very much the case. Just because of where it is at the minute. Chicago. So Byron, we'll move on to Chicago. And we'll jump to you first, but just a quick summary of the Chicago Bears. They went 3-14 in 2022, ended up with the #1 overall pick. They lost their final 10 games, which is a franchise record losing streak. Quarterback Justin Fields was the 3rd quarterback in NFL history to run through 1,000 yards. Pop quiz question: who are the other 2?
What was it? 3rd to reach Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts? ?
Michael Vick.
Jeez, yeah.
Oh man! And they also didn't win a division game. Chicago, they went 0-6 in the division. I saw the biggest off-season headline was the trade of the #1 overall pick to Carolina. They got the 9th pick, number 61, a 1st next year, a 2nd in 2025, and DJ Moore. And they did some work on their linebackers in free agency, as well as other things. But the biggest ones were Tremaine Edwards and TJ Edwards, arguably. So, Byron, as somebody who is in or just outside of Chicago, you lead the way on this one. How is Chicago shaping up heading into 2023?
I think really well, to be honest. I'm kind of surprised I had them for so many wins as I did this year. It's kind of feels like a bit of a fool's gold one, but I mean, they do play the NFC South, so like that's some kind of cheaper wins than you might get in other years. I love what they've done in the offseason. I think Dan Albright is a mauling tackle. exactly what they need. I think the draft was pretty solid. The trade for DJ Moore and all the picks, I think, was really good for a team who don't need a quarterback. I think they've done really well there. DJ Moore himself is... I think it's tough because you can't say like he's a legitimate number one receiver when he's only had the stats he's had in his NFL career, but he's had a very weak quarterback team for the last 4 years of his career. It's hard to see that he's stood out and even produced like he has, considering he was throwing him the ball for 4 years. It's kind of impressive what he's done with that. I think the Bears still have big question marks. I think this defense is still going to be a big issue, but I'm very impressed with what they've done this offseason. I think generally Ryan Poles has done a good job. The Chase Claypool trade last year was a shocker and it shouldn't have happened. But outside of that, I think all of his moves have generally been pretty sensible, pretty smart. I like the 2 linebacker signings. I think they've paid quite a bit to do so, but I think it's always an important part of Chicago's tradition is having strong linebacker play. And I think this is another strength towards it.
So what Chicago, Chase Claypool cost them, what was the 33rd overall pick?
Well, actually, they had the 32nd overall pick because Miami didn't get to use their first rounder. So but yeah, it should have been the 33rd pick, yeah.
The first and the second round, yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't pay a 5th round pick for Chase Claypool, realistically.
And the Steelers got Joey Porter Jr. for that, I think.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. He would look good in Chicago.
Yeah.
I kind of like, it's not spectacular, but I like their running back room too. Khalil Herbert's really shone analytically in kind of spot duty, spotting with David Montgomery, who's obviously not there. Deontay Foreman, I think, has been super impressive in the last 2 years. He looks like mini Derrick Henry. And, he came off the Achilles injury, which I think he suffered in 2019 or 2020 now. And the Achilles injury is obviously such a thing for running backs where they just don't recover. And he's like one of the ones who really has. And it's taken him forever to do so. But I think between him, Herbert, and Roschon Johnson, who was the backup to Bijan Robinson at Texas, he shone again when he got his moment. But you're not going to play much when Bijan Robinson's a running back ahead of you. I like that 3 running back room. Justin Fields is obviously, I'm not sure if I want to say the best running quarterback in the NFL, but he's certainly in the top 3 with Lamar and Jalen Hurts. They're all slightly different to each other, but it's an interesting attack. Darnell Mooney is much better as a 2 than a 1. He shouldn't be a 1. I don't know. I'm kind of optimistic about Chicago. For the first time in my time living here, I think they're finally building the right way and in a good position.
Good stuff. Yeah, very exciting off-season. Jeremy, we'll throw over to you kind of, from your perspective then. Give us your take on kind of how the Bears are shaping up heading into 2023.
I have the feeling they're one of the most improved teams in the NFL overall. Is it enough for them to win the division? It's a possibility. Is it a probability? That remains to be seen. Like I said, it depends on the development of Justin Fields and his decision making. Because we saw last time on several games, especially during the losing streak, he would decide to run, which he's a great runner, but he'd have guys wide open 10 to 15 yards down the field and miss them. Until he fixes that part of his game, it's going to be a struggle offensively because it is a passing league. So he has to improve and get over that 60% completion percentage thing that he's got going. And he also has to improve his decision making. Do I think they're going to get only 3 wins? No. I think their floor is right around 5 and their ceiling is 9.
Quick one on Justin Fields. Well, Justin Fields, how much do you put the down? Because he seems to very much be, pull it down and run. How much is that down to the offensive line, or how much do you think it is just it being Justin Fields being a bit sort of skitty in the pocket?
Well, even watch the games that he had against Detroit and other divisional opponents. He struggled with that decision making. There would be guys open downfield, and he decided to tuck and run. Part of that was the offensive line, which it is shored up some. But to quote a female Bears fan that I've had on my podcast, they still have lazy eye Tevin Jenkins who can't see to protect the blind side. Hopefully they move Darnell right there and move him to the right side, because if Fields can see what's coming at him, maybe he won't be sacked as much.
huge problem last year, wasn't it? The number of times Fields was sat for the Bears. I've got the sort of feeling that Fields will progress in 2023. I thought it was a real difficult year for him last year, and he made the best of a real bad situation and sort of show what he can do. That led to the Chicago Bears being the worst team in the NFL. However, I think there's a lot of positivity there and a lot to look forward to in Chicago, and just the front office deserve a huge shout out and a lot of credit for how they've gone about the rebuild, whether it works or not, but ultimately seem to be making the right moves at the right time and sensible moves to set them up for success as long as they can, as long as possible in the future. Byron, we heard from Jeremy there in terms of his floor and ceiling for the Chicago Bears. Byron, what is it?
I have them higher than I thought I would do when I'd done the playoff thing. I have them at 10-7, which the defense doesn't make me think they should be 10-7, but they have a really nice schedule. I can't see where they're going to lose games. I have them winning, really. I mean, they're going to, but it's hard to see them finishing 10-7 because the defense still needs work. But I think that really is their ceiling, is 10 wins. It just happens to where I've got them predicted. I've tried predicting them to lose games. I tried to be more critical when I realized I had them winning so many, and I was like, well, I think I initially had them at 11-6. I was like, there can't be an 11-win team. They just can't. So I managed to give them an extra loss and get them down to 10-7, but the schedule's really soft. Like I say, I don't think the Vikings are going to be good. They play the NFC South, which isn't a good division. I don't think Oakland don't exist. I don't think Vegas are going to be very good in the AFC West, where they're going to play. They play Denver in the AFC West as well. So I think there's a lot of soft teams in there. I'm at 10-7 for their record, which I do think, like I say, is their ceiling. And floor, it's not going to be 3 wins again, surely, or everyone's fired. Maybe 6 wins, I guess, would be the floor, and that'd be really disappointing, I think, considering the offseason they've had.
I'm similar. I think kind of 6. Yeah, I think 6 is the floor, and I could see them getting to 9 or 10 wins as well. And as I said, we've discussed 10 might be enough to win this division. 9 might be enough to get 9 might be enough to get your wild card place. Sneaking into the playoffs I have as a ceiling, and probably getting beat by the strongest, the number 2 seed on the road in the playoffs. That's it for the Chicago Bears. We'll move on then to the Detroit Lions. Jeremy, your team, and we'll get your viewpoint shortly. So the Detroit Lions 2022 went 9-8. It's their first winning record since 2017. They started 1-6. They had a horrendous start, and then won 8 of their last 10 games, and the most porous defense in the NFL. I think that's fair to say. Off-season headlines, they addressed some of those secondary issues in free agency: Cam Sutton, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Emmanuel Mosley. And they loaded up at running back with number 12 overall pick Jahmyr Gibbs and free agent David Montgomery. Jeremy, we'll fire it straight across to you. How do you see your Detroit Lions going in 2023?
I see the good things going ahead because of what happened after they fired the defensive passing game coordinator, Aubrey Pleasant. He had a scheme that was very hard for the corners to comprehend what they were supposed to do, and it showed. And it also led to poor coverage in the running game. When you have that type of thing going on with your passing game, your running game fails. Once they got rid of him and they shorted up and went to mostly a zone defense outside of Jeff Okudah, the whole defense as a whole played better. We started limiting teams from scoring 20 points a game. We started stopping the run except for the Carolina game, which that was attested more to the field condition and their cleats that they wore, that they didn't have the right cleats on because they didn't know the condition of the field. And you saw it adjusted come halftime because they had over 250 yards rushing in the first half, and we held them somewhat to 60 in the second half, which is a huge disparity if you think about it. And that was because they changed their cleats in the locker room for the condition of the field. We came back in that game. We didn't lose it by much, but it was such a huge difference to overcome. They just couldn't do it. So I love what they did in the draft, drafting Jahmyr Gibbs to replace the oft-injured DeAndre Swift. And everybody says, but he didn't miss a lot of games. No, but he missed a lot of time in games as well. And you can see it by his snap counts. he started off those first 3 games. He was great. He got hurt. He went down. And then he had, I think, one more good game. And then after that, he was only getting 6 to 10 touches a game, which is why he had 99 carries. Yes, he had a great 5.4 yards per carry, but that's because of those 3 to 4 great games he had. So Jahmyr Gibbs is that type of running back, but faster and a better weapon in the receiving room, as we've seen, because DeAndre Swift has had concentration drops in big moments in games. Then you had David Montgomery, a guy that was on an O-line that was allowing contact at 0.7 of a yard behind the line. It was rated the worst O-line in the league, yet he still averaged 4.3 yards per carry, whereas the Lions were second best in the league for creating separation for running backs at 4.3 yards of separation before contact. So you take a guy like that who gets 4.3 yards to get at full speed with no contact, and he should flourish as the main bell cow running back for us. I think the floor is 10 wins and the ceiling is 13.
Very, very positive outlook on the Detroit Lions. There's just a quick question I want to ask around the running backs in terms of do you feel that Gibbs and Montgomery is that enough, and is that an upgrade on Swift? And obviously Jamal Williams, who had a great season last year, has ended up down in New Orleans. Is that enough to replace that? And do you see you're going to get more production out of Gibbs and Montgomery than you did out of Williams and Swift?
I think we are going to get more production out of them because technically Montgomery is a more talented back. He led the league in broken tackles last year, whereas we had 4.3 yards per carry of separation, as I mentioned. Jamal Williams averaged 4.3 yards per carry with that productive O-line. You give a guy that had no O-line and give him that type of protection, he should do better than him. It won't be all of his touchdowns from within the 10-yard line at that point.
Just the other take I wanted to get from you, Jeremy, was around, touched on Gibbs, but I was very shocked on draft night at both what the Lions did with what the Lions did on their 2 picks. I'd suggest I'm not the only person that was shocked. What's your view then? Are you happy with what the Lions did, particularly with the 2 first rounders, or do you feel maybe they should have taken others that were on the board?
Well, I was surprised, but yet when I looked into it more that evening, because I looked into more of what those players were and what they meant, Jack Campbell is basically a linebacker in the mold of Chris Spielman, and it'll be the biggest linebacker we've had on the defense since Chris Spielman. He's not the fastest guy, but he plays hard. He knows how to stop the run, and he's decent in pass coverage, which is something our linebackers struggle with, which is going to help us across the board. Then you look at Jahmyr Gibbs, a guy with 4.3 speed, which is 0.1 of a second faster than DeAndre Swift, with all the same tools. That means it should be better talent-wise, barring health.
Yeah.
Because you can't teach speed.
Huge piece there, isn't it? Again, with these around keeping them healthy. And then the last bit, because I love what the Detroit Lions did then in the second round. I think they're the 2 picks there: Sam Laporta, the tight end out of Iowa, and Brian Branch, a bit of a hybrid safety corner, isn't he, out of Alabama? What are you looking forward to out of those 2?
I'm looking forward to possibly not ever seeing Will Harris take the field in the secondary again, because Brian Branch should either be playing the dime or the nickel or the safety position instead of him whenever somebody needs to come up. Because we also have Tracy Walker back healthy. We also added Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who led the league in interceptions last year. I mean, the secondary, also with the addition of Cam Sutton and Emmanuel Mosley is just starting to take field reps in camp. So it's looking like our secondary went from a weakness to a strength, which should also help that front 7 get more sacks, because we had a ton of pressures, but not a lot of sacks. But that's because there was no coverage other than Kirby Joseph, which that was Aaron Rodgers' best receiver last year when he played against us.
Good stuff. Loving the Aaron Rodgers hits as well. Not going to get him anymore, so might as well get him in while you can. Byron, we'll move across to you then. Jeremy, thanks ever so much for that. Byron, again, your kind of take on what the Lions have done in the offseason heading into 2023.
I think overall I kind of love it, but I hate what they did in the first round, but I love what they did as a off-season. I think Jameer Gibbs at 12 is kind of insanity. I think he could be an absolutely fine player, and I think he's an upgrade on DeAndre Swift. I fully agree with Jeremy. I just think you shouldn't be drafting number 12 at that once you've already paid David Montgomery as well, who I'm not huge on David Montgomery, but he's a massive upgrade on Jamal Williams. Fully agree on that as well. Jack Campbell 18 is more justifiable to me, but it's certainly not a pick I would have made. I don't know when. It's always hard because, like, well, you could have got him later. Well, you might not have got him later. You don't know that. I just think those are two non-premium positions that you've kind of. I think it's. I don't want to say hubris because I think it's maybe a little harsh. Because I do love the Lions, but it just feels like they've made like win now picks when I think they are still a work in progress. I don't think they're fully settled. I think you could have improved at DB, and DB room's great, but a lot of that is short-term contracts. It's not. They're not settled forever. But overall, I really like what they've done in the off-season. I don't want to sound too negative because I do love the Lions and love Dan Campbell, love the way they play. I like the signing of Graham Glasgow as well, who is a former Lion, came back, and he's going to be just more insurance for that O-line, which is beastly. And I know we've touched on the first 4 picks, but before I started getting first-round hype, one of my favorite NFL drafts, what I want to see happen was whoever takes Hendon Hooker in the 3rd round is going to be my favorite pick of the draft because, yeah, he's not a young quarterback, which is absolutely fine to me because I don't really care how he's going to be when he's 37. Like, if you only get 5 years out of him, that's absolutely fine. But I think he's a great backup for Jared Goff, and I think he very much impressed me in college. And, yeah, he is an older quarterback, so he should be good, but he was good. I think in the 3rd round, he's great value. Like I say, I wish they'd maybe swapped some of the picks around and got, if they took a wide receiver one, because I do think there is some slight issues of wide receiver depth with Detroit. Jameson Williams, hopefully, he's great when he comes back, but he was injured. So when I say he didn't show much as a rookie, like he showed great air yards and he showed great potential, but he didn't do much. And obviously he was coming off injury, so I don't want to say he's never going to make it, but I'd have loved to have seen them. If they'd added, instead of like Jameer Gibbs, if they took someone else at 12 and then took, Quentin Johnson or JSN at 18, I'd be very excited about what Detroit did this summer. As it is, I think they've done really well, and I don't want to harp on the negatives because I do like the Lions. I think they're a really good team, and I think they're really well run generally. Those 2 picks I just thought were too early, and paying premiums for non-premium positions. One of my favorite little Jerry mentioned there about Jamal Williams always having, basically on the 1 yard for his touchdowns, on carries on goal-to-goal situations last year. Jamal Williams had 38 carries that were on to go to goal. So he had 38 across the 17-game season. In second place was Ezekiel Elliott and Joe Mixon, who had 22. And then Dalvin Cook had 21, which just, man, if you give David Montgomery 38 goal-to-goal touchdowns, carries, I think he's going to put up a Jamal Williams type season. So it's probably not going to repeat. And I'm sure some of those were duplicate goal-to-goal. He didn't get in the first time, but he got in the second or third attempt. But I found that a staggering statistic.
There's a lot of goal-to-go carries, yeah. I, like you, sort of am a big fan of what Detroit have done. Overall, again, those first-round picks are probably, for me, the bit where maybe they could have done better. They are very much win now. Picks I'd expect to see maybe a team who are pushing to get over the edge to make, but look, this is a Detroit Lions team who, in the back end of the second half of last season, were a really, really good football team. Showed what they're capable of doing. I absolutely love Dan Campbell. I'd run through a brick wall for Dan Campbell. Yeah. I think, and it's nice. And there isn't a team in the NFL I'd want to see succeed more than the Detroit Lions. I don't know if it's just the Honolulu Blue. I don't know, but
it's the Lions. Like, everyone wants to shit on the Lions forever and ever, and everyone wants to shit on Detroit forever and ever. Like, let them win a playoff game. Get them in the playoffs. Yes. Come on. And just on the Dan Campbell note as well, Ben Johnson turned down interviews with the Texans to stay as the OC. Like, that's the kind of thing I want to see succeed as well. Someone who loves being where he's at, who isn't pushing to get a head coach job as soon as possible because he loves his offense. He loves where he is. I'm maybe going to be a bit over egging it, but he might be the best OC in football right now. Kyle Shanahan isn't an OC as a head coach. Nick Sirianni isn't an OC as a head coach. Pure OC, I don't know of anyone who's done a better job than Ben Johnson. That offense was humming last year. Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't what anyone thinks is a number one wide receiver going to Detroit. You know, he was overlooked by a lot of people, me included, and he balls out every week. Ben Johnson is, you know, lost TJ Hawkinson midway through last season as well. And did it slow them down? Not a bit.
No. And we're going to move on because we're going to wrap up on the line shortly and we'll start looking at the odds for the division. But, you know, as a bit of a spoiler, Jeremy, how does it feel that the Lions are the bookmakers' favourites for the NFC North? When was the last time that happened?
1993. 1993, which they did win. They fell short in their first playoff game versus the Philadelphia Eagles, who they traded Rodney Peete to.
So the first time since 1993 that the Lions have been a preseason favourite for the division. And let's move on because we kind of talked a little bit, floor and ceiling, about the Lions already. We're looking at the odds. So the Giants are plus. Why did I say the Giants? The Lions. I'll get there. Detroit Lions are plus 130, followed by the Vikings at plus 300, the Chicago Bears at plus 380, and the Packers at plus 380, I believe. Yeah, just double check that. That's right. The tightest division in football, according to the bookmakers, based on the odds of winning it. Jeremy, do you think it's going to play out like that? Are we going to see that this is going to be the tightest and closest division in football in 2023?
I think it's going to really come down to that Week 18 between Minnesota and Detroit, which with our new alternate helmets, that'll be the second time we wear them with our grays, is Week 18. The first time will be the Monday Night Football game versus the Raiders at home, because for some reason, even though the whites are an alternate uniform, because we use white as our regular colored jersey as well, they cannot use the alternate helmets with the white jerseys. So that's why you're only going to see it twice this year. But I think this is leaning towards they're changing the color scheme again next year when they do the uniform change, which is why they went to this. And it's funny that the 2-bar extended Lions logo that they used on that helmet hasn't been used since 1969, but they started using it in 1949, which in that time they had 3 world championships, which later became the Super Bowl.
There's always a piece, isn't there, out when teams use kind of, whether it's a throwback kit or the alternates or whatever, that just makes it almost feels like that just means they're going to win the game. What if Minnesota do the same and wear something in Week 18 for that be the decider for the NFC North? Which is interesting. But I've seen those helmets and they do look really, really cool. So yeah, Byron, do you think kind of a similar thing? Like, do you agree with the bookies? Is this going to be the closest division that we see in the NFL in 2023?
Yeah, I think so. So I had the Bears at 10-7. I had the Packers 8-9. I have the Lions 10-7 as well. I had the Lions, whatever the algorithm is, they won the division when I done the playoff predictor, but they did tie with the Bears on record. If I was betting on a winner here, I would pick the Bears just on odds. I don't think the Packers are doing it. I'm kind of stunned the Vikings are shorter than the Bears based on how I think the teams are set up, but Vegas loses less than I do. So yeah, I'd be betting the Bears, I guess, at plus 380 rather than the Lions at plus 130, just because the odds, you know, with such a tight division, I don't think a plus 130 team should really be there. But yeah, I understand it.
I think for me, probably the one I probably take. So we've just got a quick quick comment about the Lions, because we were talking about, or Jeremy was talking earlier on about how the Lions got a ton of pressures, but not a lot of sacks off the result. But expecting this, then Lion King saying might flip the other way, so they get a ton of coverage sacks this year because their secondary is a lot stronger. Lion King, Thanks ever so much for tuning in. I believe you'll be tuning in on through Jeremy's channel, which is Kneecap Biting. What a great name for a YouTube channel. Cool. The ones that really intrigue me for this is I think that division is really, really tight. I probably, as much as we talked about it, I like Minnesota at 3-1 plus 300. But to make the playoffs interesting, I really like Chicago at plus 170. So just short of 2-1 to make the playoffs. I think that's a really, really good value pick. Jeremy, is there anything screaming out there from the odds there, from whether it's the odds of the division winner or to make or not make the playoffs that's intriguing you from an odds perspective?
The only thing I'm worried about, because of the outside the division, there are such top-heavy divisions, such as the NFC West and the NFC East. You know, you got Philly and Dallas at the top there, and you got the Rams and Seahawks so far until the Seahawks get knocked off. Because if Eugene Cyril Smith becomes Geno Smith of old, the Seahawks will struggle. Other than that, yeah, that's how I see it breaking down, and that you might see two 11-win teams come out of the West with the heads-up schedule knocking out which one is the division winner. And I see the same thing in the NFC East. You got 10 to 12 wins for either the Philly or the Dallas Cowboys, which would knock one of them out of that one seed. So that being said, it could end up that a 10-win team outside the division does not make the playoffs.
So, yeah, interesting look, because I suppose that scenario is possible if we see the divisions being top heavy. I mean, we saw 3 come out of the East, NFC East last year, didn't we? In the Eagles, Cowboys, and Giants. So, and that was, I suppose, due to it being a particularly weak NFC South, which I'd fully expect to see again. But we'll talk about that when we do the NFC South in a couple of weeks' time. Let's move on to the win totals, then we'll wrap up with that before we call it a night. So we've got the Lions, 9.5 is the line, Vikings 8.5, the Bears and Packers 7.5. Byron, what's kind of your thoughts of these lines? Do they seem about right for where these teams are?
Yeah, I think so. My favorite bet would be the under on Minnesota, but I feel like I'm kind of on an island with that because you guys seem to rate them higher. Vegas seems to rate them higher. So it could just be me way on an island. We're thinking Minnesota are going to be worse than they are. It's really tight. Vegas always gets, not always, but generally gets the numbers right. And I think this is a real tight division. And I think this is it's tough to have too much. This is where I'm putting the mortgage. Any of these ones, it's, I'd be slightly tempted by Lions over, but it's minus 130 at 9.5. If the Lions have only got 9 wins, I wouldn't be like stunned and calling for Dan Campbell's head. I think, like I said, I'm at 10 and 7. I don't think they're winning 13, 14 games. So 9.5 is more than fair. I'd pick the over, but at minus 130, it's tough to stake down a ton to get there. Bears over 7.5, I think will happen. Packers over 7.5 will happen, I think, but neither of them I'd be rushing to the bookies to get the money on. Like I say, my favorite there is under 8.5 for Minnesota. Yeah.
It's tough for this one. I think where the lines are, and then there's not much movement. There doesn't seem to be a really good value play anywhere. No. Jeremy, anything screaming out for you for the win totals where some of our viewers might get a bit of value in the odds?
Well, I'm going to go and give you what I'm doing for my parlay this season already, because last year I had over for the Vikings, over for the Lions, under for Bears and Packers. This year, I'm going over Lions, under Vikings, over Bears, under Packers.
Nice. Over, under. Nice. Well, we'll get that one down. All tips and all parlays and all bets discussed on Good Teams and Great Teams cover we keep a record of. So we'll see how you shape up versus the rest of our guests that come on across the year, Jeremy. For me, it's tough. There's not a real value play there for me, which I'm really, really struggling with. Maybe the Bears only win 7 games plus 105, but I think it's really, really tough, that one. There isn't a bit where and that's the point of these lines, right? But there isn't a side that's really, really charming me, and maybe Packers under as well. 53 minutes is just breezed by there, gentlemen.
I do have a I always like to try and find a good value bet in the specials markets, kind of, and it's kind of touched on what Lion King was saying earlier, what Jeremy was saying earlier. Aiden Hutchinson, Defensive Player of the Year at 3,300. 33 to 1. I think that's some real value to it. If the Lions increase their sack numbers, he got 9.5 as a rookie. And sneaky,
I made that bet already.
Sneaky, he got 3 interceptions last year as a rookie at the end. I don't expect him to get 3 interceptions again. I don't expect him to get any. I don't really expect any DNs to get any interceptions. So if he gets any, but like that sack number could go up. And he should have been the first overall pick last year, really, let's face it. But like, I don't know. I just think he's a real nice bet at 33 to 1 or 3,300 to be Defensive Player of the Year. So I always like to try and find a value, season long bet or long shot. So that's kind of my one for the NFC North.
Guessing you'll be on board with Aiden Hutchinson, Defensive Player of the Year. That would certainly mean the Detroit Lions have done good things then, Jeremy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I already put my $50 bet on it.
Nice. $50 at 33 plus 3,300. That'll definitely pay for another vacation. Right, gents. We've come to the end. 55 minutes is just absolutely breezed by in the NFC North. One of the more interesting divisions in football to talk about. Byron, thank you very much as always. Jeremy, just one last shout out before you go. Thanks very much for coming on Good Teams Win Great Teams Cover. Give us one last shout out. Give our guys and viewers, where can we find you if we're looking to follow you?
When you have good teams win, great teams cover. In the last 2 years, the best cover team in the NFL has been the Detroit Lions. Even though they lost a lot of games, they were in 80% of them. So that being said, you can find me at Kneecap Biting with the Detroit Lions on YouTube. You can also find me on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel, where we do more around the board sports shows. And you can also find me on Let's Talk Sports and Sideline Sports, which we are now combined for a total of 200 plus shows on YouTube.
Yeah, great shout out there, Jeremy. Yeah, the Let's Talk Sports guys and Sideline Sports families coming together. Great to be a part of, and great to create these opportunities to kind of sit down with more fantastic people. So, Jeremy, once again, thanks very much for coming on. Byron, thanks again as always. This has been another episode of Good Teams Win, Great Teams Cover. Go follow us, follow the podcast on Spotify, where you can be notified of new episodes, and come and find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter at GTW_GTC. Until next time,